right, welcome. I thought that intro was going to play a bit longer, but you're all very welcome back to the Craft Cannabis Summit. Thank you, Chiba, for having us here. Thank you for having me here. This session is looking at how to market a cannabis business. I'm Marc Wegerif. I'm from University of Pretoria, where I lecture in development studies. And I suppose I'm here because I think there's an enormous development potential in the cannabis industry, and I hope that that can be realized. We must thank our sponsor for this session, Evolved Magazine. I had a bit of difficulty finding it, so the URL is Evolved Magazine, written as one word, .co.za. So thanks very much to Evolved Magazine for your support for this event. And thanks to the headline sponsors, Druid's Garden, Grow One Africa, and yeah, we're broadcasting live, well, from different places, but the core of this is the Chiba Cannabis Academy, Africa's first cannabis academy, just outside Johannesburg, opening in April. You can take a tour there tomorrow. You can still register and go and have a tour of the new Cannabis Academy campus tomorrow. So thank you very much. But most important now is our great panelists. So I'm going to ask them to join one by one. We have a very exciting group of panelists. I think first I just want to hear how each of them got involved in the cannabis space, and we'll take it from there. So first of all, Pierre from SilverLeaf Investments. Hope you're with us. Welcome. How did you get involved in the industry? You have a big background in media, but now you have a focus on cannabis.
Yeah, I've been watching the cannabis industry for a couple of years. Well, I grew up in a cannabis part of the country. Always been interested, been watching, got involved a couple of years ago. I identified the opportunity to help our country in terms of job creation and economic growth, wrote a proposal to the government, and to my utter surprise, they said, great.
Okay.
Writer Consulting asked me to be a consultant. I wrote a report from them, and I've never looked back.
Great. Okay, we'll hear more about that later. For now, Travis, can you please join us all the way from the USA and working with Surfside? Travis, welcome.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, started investing in medical cannabis in the States around 2013. Then came to Cape Town, did my MBA there, and wrote my master's thesis or dissertation on how to market cannabis within the South African socioeconomic context, and moved back to the States after that and got involved in Surfside, which is what I do now.
Okay, so your studies were made for this panel. Good. And now I'd like to welcome Mbali from Startup Grind and other activities. Startup Grind sounds like a lot of hard work, a lot of grind.
A lot of grind, yeah. I'm heavily involved in the startup communities as well as digital online communities. My relationship with the cannabis space came from a place of curiosity and wanting to learn how to effectively grow and nurture my own trees and plants for any kinds of reasons. The majority of them all died in the beginning, and now through education and platforms like these, I'm able to upskill. So I come and I share this with other community leaders in other spaces, farmers, growers, locals, etc.
Okay, great, welcome. And then Mirishin, last and of course not least, Mirishin from Abyss Inc. Welcome.
Hi Mark, hi guys. My name is Mirishin. I'm co-owner of Abyss Inc. in Pretoria. We're a small medical dispensary specializing in patient-specific medicine. Started in the cannabis industry in 2014 when it was still highly illegal. And from there, it's just growing into an opportunity for us to teach people not only how to make their own medicine, but if you're not a cannabis user, that you can benefit from this plant and this industry in the long run.
Okay. Great, thanks very much. So we're going to go around and hear more from each of you about what you do. And the focus of this panel, of course, is on how to market a cannabis business. There are so many business opportunities out there, and we hope more as the space gets legalized and opened up much more than it is now already. So there's so much opportunities, but no business is going to work if it can't market its product. So this is a really key part of an effective cannabis sector, is that we get the marketing right. And I think there are particular challenges with cannabis marketing, especially in the current legal environment. There are particular obstacles and challenges So, experiences of how we get around those would be very useful to share. So welcome to the panelists and welcome to all the participants who are with us here. Do feel free to, put things in the chat line. We can't promise we'll see them all, but you can also introduce yourselves and share with each other. So, feel free to use the chat function as well. And we will try and pick up some questions from you as we go along. To move the discussion forward, I'm going to follow the same order to keep my, because my memory might get confused if I switch around the order. For each of you, it'd be nice just to hear a little bit more about your work, especially what you do in marketing, and perhaps just think about, what are the main opportunities and challenges that we see at the moment in the cannabis marketing space, specifically in terms of marketing. Pierre, over to you.
Cannabis is a very broad space. It's almost, it's every target market. But the real thing about building a brand in any business, including cannabis, is decide who your target market is, communicate your promise, and be consistent. And in my mind, the most important part is be authentic. We've got a very specific culture within cannabis. On the one hand, it's the let's call it the deep cannabis culture. On the other hand, I've just launched a company where we're targeting investors. So that's a whole different target market, a different way of communicating. The challenges you have around cannabis is a lot of it's around social media, and you use the word cannabis and boof, Facebook decides we don't like you anymore, and suddenly you can't advertise. So it's a very interesting space to be. We found in the last 2 months launching a fund targeting investors. It's been interesting. It's incredible. You would think that that's the part of the market that knows almost the least about cannabis, but there's a lot of interest around the topic itself for various reasons. So it's really choose your brand, choose your positioning, and just stay authentic and true to your message. So I'll leave it there.
Yes, I'm up.
I would say, Pierre, you didn't say very much about your background, and you have such a rich background in media, especially. You've been involved with YFM. I saw you launched, I think, what must have been a very innovative platform at the time back in 2011. What is it, Tulu platform?
Tulu,
yeah.
I can talk very briefly about that. So I was involved in the startup of both YFM and ETV. ETV to this day is the only private TV channel for people who are not from the country. And YFM was a fascinating energy where we took Kwaito music, which was underground, and brought it to the fore and had an unbelievable response. It's probably one of the most successful launches of a radio station in the world. In 2 weeks, we were the biggest station in the country. And I find a lot of similarities around cannabis. It may be underground, but it's got that passion, it's got that grit. And that's probably why I'm going down the line of choose your target market and be authentic, because if you're authentic, you're going to connect with that target market.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I think I wanted to highlight to the audience as well that Pierre is someone who knows what he's talking about when he's talking about launching platforms and so on. So thanks, Pierre, and we'll definitely hear more from you.
My last comment. Sorry, I'm not being very verbal today. I launched a platform called Tulu, where we had 35 streaming TV channels. And one of the products that came out of that is Cannabis TV. Now that platform has sort of suffered a little bit because I've then dedicated my life to cannabis, but I'm hoping that could be an online streaming platform where we address one of the biggest issues in cannabis, which is misinformation, myths, complete disinformation and lies, and change the perceptions of the public. Anyway, thank you.
No, great. Thanks for that. So Travis, I mean, really very welcome, and with the experience you have coming from the USA, but you also spent time here, you studied here, as you mentioned. So maybe a bit more about yourself and what you're doing and your perspective in terms of the opportunities and challenges in marketing cannabis.
Yeah, thanks. I I think, yeah, I agree with Pierre that it is really important to understand your consumer in order to market any brand, and that can be difficult in cannabis, seeing that it's an emerging industry. Surfside is really built to kind of solve the issue that exists in social media. We're a digital advertising technology platform that is used to identify, understand, and engage with current and prospective cannabis consumers based on billions of real-world signals. So we're profiling every consumer in the US and Canada into over 25,000 different attributes. That's demographic, financial attributes, their purchase behaviors, online and offline, their location movements, their visitation patterns. And then we're integrated with a lot of the major e-commerce and POS platforms in the cannabis space. So we're collecting now over 35% of all cannabis transactional data that occurs in the cannabis space, and we're appending that data to consumers, to their devices. Every consumer in the US and Canada has a Surfside ID assigned to their devices. So we take that data and we use it to run highly targeted digital advertising campaigns through mainstream apps and websites, basically everything on the internet except for Facebook and Google, which are private marketplaces. And yeah, we reach people that have, we're profiling people who visit dispensaries. We have every dispensary in the US and Canada loaded into our location database. We're profiling people based on their online cannabis purchases, so we can target known cannabis consumers, but then also we can take that data and use it to find the attributes that current consumers have in common and go out and find everyone else within driving distance of your dispensary that also looks like a cannabis consumer, but maybe is yet to purchase. On the B2B side, for someone like Pierre, we would look for people who look like they're leaning towards cannabis, but also have a tendency to invest. And we could hit them with ads if you wanted to do a kind of investment focused campaign. But yeah, it's all really focused on using data to find the right consumers with your message.
I have to ask then, what does a potential cannabis consumer look like? You said...
So it depends on the brand completely. I think a lot of brands are built to appeal to some certain audience, and then we find that that's not really the audience that actually engages with the marketing campaign at all, which is why when we work with a client, generally what we do is we start by profiling their consumer in how it relates to the cannabis consumer. So we'll drop a pixel on their website and profile their actual website traffic. We'll look at the foot traffic at their dispensary and say, of the 25,000 attributes that you're assigning to this consumer, what are the 2,000 attributes that everyone visiting this store have in common? And let's go out and find more people like that. You might think you're appealing to 24-year-old women who do yoga, and you end up appealing to 65-year-old men with 4 cats.
Okay. All right. So Travis did his MBA at UCT and he's into marketing. I thought to make him more human, I should share that he also does spoken word performances quite often and is into storytelling. So that I found that encouraging about Travis as well. So welcome, Travis, and we'll hear some spoken word as well. We'll see. Good. So Mbali, you've done a lot on Facebook and other places. Can you tell us a bit more about it? And
sure thing. Yeah, sure thing. About just over 2 years ago, I was invited by Facebook to head up their community leadership circles, which means that I created a community of other community leaders, communities being people that come together with a shared interest over a specific topic. And it's from there that I find kind of myself as an on-the-ground person dealing with challenges that people face. And in the grower communities, it's the laws that we have that dictate what people can and cannot do and getting around that, and how other growers can connect with other growers, or, that sort of framework. I also wanted to add just to what some people mentioned earlier is it's really interesting looking at how the internet is working at the moment. There's been a massive, I think it's like a 52% increase according to Google on people that are searching how-tos as opposed to going directly to purchase the product. So I think in the educational space, in the conversational space, that's where I find myself comfortable and very active. And I'm the connector of people, a resource to this, that, to that, understanding what the challenges are, bringing them to the right people so we can create those conversations.
You're muted, Mark.
Yeah, the message I was trying to give you is that when you are not speaking, please switch off your mics. So I already enacted that example of switching your mic on. And then please remember to switch it back on again when you need to speak. Do not follow my example. So thank you very much, Mbali. Mirishin, over to you. I really don't know what Ibis Inc. is. I'm interested to hear.
Okay, so Ibis Inc. is a small medical dispensary. We make patient-specific medicine. So we walk a little journey with our people. We don't believe leaving you until you are healed. We work with specific strains. We've built this up over the last couple of years. So that's how we do. We want to give people some advice when it comes to stepping into the cannabis industry. We've been here for a long time. We've seen how brands have grown. We've seen the type of things that have been done, and that what works is the issue we have in South Africa is they've made it legal for us to use at home, and they've made it against our constitutional right to have this plant, but we're not allowed to sell it yet, which is quite difficult because I have a father who's in a wheelchair who can't grow his own cannabis or even extract his own oil. So marketing here is a little bit difficult. So we prefer doing marketing through education, because that's where you need to be able to educate the person about the plant, about the different products, about everything. Social media is good. I think there's just a lot happening on social media. So we teach our people that we help get into business. We teach them to be completely creative. Think of something completely new. Go look at what the health shops are doing. Go speak to the clinics. You've got a really good medicine. Go a little bit forward. Technology. A lot of the people in our country, and you will know, do not have social media. They don't have phones. They don't have access to the internet. So they're not getting to Facebook. And that's the mass population of our country. So we're running education programs out to these people who most of them don't even know that cannabis has been legalized, and some of them are still getting arrested by the policemen thinking that it's so education. And this is where we need to call our Department of Education and Department of Health in, because they dropped it on everybody that it's legal. They even told us last year that if a juvenile gets caught with cannabis, they no longer have a criminal record. But nobody's gone to our schools to go fix what's going on there and tell the children that it's important for them that if they're going to cannabis to go to the right places. Sorry, I got completely sidetracked here. But in South Africa, you need to use very creative marketing, and it's a one-to-one person guy now, especially in this time when people are moving so far away from each other and people are sending emails and you get a video. Do it one-to-one. Speak to the people up front and tell them about cannabis and grow it from there.
What does that one-to-one look like? If someone is starting out in a cannabis business today, what does that look like? Because I'm interested in just trying to get, what is working at the moment for people? From Travis, you've got a sophisticated monitoring and so on. I imagine that doesn't exist yet in South Africa. I'm very open to being clarified, but the sort of data on cannabis users might not be available yet.
No, and most people don't have smartphones in the country, so everything that I'm talking about is real far away.
Yeah. But I think it's good to hear that. It's good to hear, where we could be going and what we got to be thinking. And maybe we'll come back to that. But what is working today? If someone's starting up a business today, what can they be doing?
Can I just say that the first thing you need to do if you're starting up a cannabis business is to get the right mentors. And it's extremely important that you understand that the more you know about this plant, the less you know about this plant. The more you know about the medicine, the more complicated it gets. And if you don't have the right people behind you, the right doctors, the right mentors, the right oil makers, the right farmers, it is extremely important that people need to understand the seed to sale system with this. You can't be buying flowers to make oils from someone that you've never met. You don't know what they use to extract these flowers with. You've got to be very careful to protect your end client there, and also to protect our farmers, because some of our farmers are being ripped off and they're being paid R2 a gram. Yeah. Where, just because of they're living in certain areas. So there's a lot of things that need to change, and for us to be able to market.
Okay, Mbali, come in. Yeah, there's a lot that needs to change, but also what can work now despite these constraints?
Well, I don't have the exact answer to that. I just wanted to bring it back to what she was saying, which is quite interesting. You said, starting out, find the right mentor, find this and that and the other. Because it has been illegal for so long, these gatherings have taken place in the shadows. The conversations have been taking place in discrete places. So, it's difficult for anyone to just sit on Google and find a pot mentor. Like that, I don't think that's something that happens. So before that, it's kind of, I think the first step would be to have a safe platform that has everybody on that kind of database or that system or that infrastructure, which has, okay, cool, I'm looking for this, I'm looking for that. These are the people that exist. Here's the list of growers. Here's the list of suppliers, whatever, processors, it doesn't really matter. But having that all in the same room, I think, is one of the first starting points so that we have everybody in the same room to have the conversations. Currently, I feel they're just kind of limited. I have to drive literally an hour and a half out of my home to go sit somewhere really cool riverside and like chat with the right like-minded people in order to hear what they're talking about. And that was through invites from this person to the other person, and I kind of made my way there. So I think access is a major conversation starter when it comes to that.
Well, that's great. It sounds like you're going to start potmentor.com for us, and then we can all go on there and find. Please do go for it, please.
Okay, I think Pierre was going to come in.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to something about one-to-one. You know, in the older days, it was less media fragmentation, so it's a little bit more complicated now. But when we launched YFM, we didn't say like every other radio station, we're targeting to 16 to 24-year-olds. We said we're targeting 22-year-olds exactly. And we profiled them, and then we went and got our DJs, and we tried to get them, how old? 22. And we built it very specifically to a very specific profile. We combined it with a petrol bomb as the invitation, and we won a Grand Prix Lurie for that. And we did it with hardly any money. You can do left field stuff. We took the Y stickers, and we stuck them illegally on signs where there was a Y in the name. So I think it's about the one-to-one thing I really get, because if you go down to what exactly is your target market, you're going to be able to then focus on it. Cannabis, I'm going to say again, is such a broad target market. I mean, we've just been through it now with the investor target market. And amazing things can now. I posted something on LinkedIn. I've got 10,000 views. Okay. Of the LinkedIn profile on a cannabis topic, which blew my mind. I mean, I found it interesting. So the one-to-one is critical. And again, I'm going to say it one more time: be authentic to your brand and be consistent. Because if you change, the consumer will know.
Right. Okay. Thanks. We have a specific question for Travis. What percentage do flowers make up of purchases, I suppose, in what you're handling? But it does, it ties in for me with something Pierre was saying. I mean, cannabis is very broad. Flowers is one thing. There's so many products. So maybe you can answer that question about the percentage of flowers, but also maybe break it down for us a bit more, the other products that you're talking about and the markets for those.
Yeah, certainly. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. It's certainly something that we could pull from our database. More so, we're focused on finding the correct audience for a specific brand or a campaign than we are looking at like the market as a whole, but we most certainly can. I think flower or consumables in general are constantly decreasing in terms of consumption and right now, and things that are not related to smoking are obviously increasing. So edibles, vape cartridges were going up for a while, but then we had the vape crisis and things went down. Concentrates have kind of lost some of their style, but now are coming back as they figure out more ways to create concentrates without using combustion through flash frozen and things like that. But really every market and every kind of audience in itself has their own version of consumption. And, beverages are becoming more and more common here as well. I'm sorry, that doesn't answer your specific question about percentage of flower, but I would say at the beginning of the market, when flower was one of the only versions of consumption, it was a much larger percentage of what people consumed. And then as it's become legal and more accessible to purchase different types of products, then it's become much more diversified and people have moved away from things that involve fire because it's bad for your lungs.
All right. Right. Yeah. So it's a changing market, changing products, and Pierre has emphasized you must know your product focus and focus on your target market. But Mbali, you talked a lot about the sharing information, and Travis in his input also, really highlighted, I think, the importance of accurate information. It does, obviously, coming from our history and even where we are today, make me a little bit nervous when I hear about all this information on people and who are cannabis users and what are they buying and where are they and accessing them. That does make me feel nervous. I don't know if it makes you feel nervous or any of the audience feel nervous. How do we deal with that?
Well, to touch on the data element, I think data is important. It helps us understand patterns. It helps us understand what people's needs are, what they're into, what they're not. And from a marketing perspective, you kind of need to know what your audience is into so you can cater and package information specifically aimed for them. I've now completely forgotten the second part of what you were asking. No, it does not terrify me. I think it's absolutely wonderful. I think also data has a really important place in being able to capture and document information. If you look at a country like ours in South Africa, we have very interestingly documented just the history of who we are. There are a lot of cultural stories that get lost to the sea of things, and in documenting things, we can also build the future case studies of the future, the case studies of the future. So data plays a really important role, especially when it comes to understanding who you're talking to, so that we make sure that we can meet each other at the right place. Can you ask the other question again? It's gone.
I think you covered it. How do we manage the tension between privacy and for some people, still you want security and so on, but the obvious value of information in terms of the focused marketing and so on we're talking about? How do we manage that? And especially, how do we manage that for cannabis with the uncertainties around the legal status? As Mirishan said earlier, we can have it, but we can't sell it. So we're obviously sitting with a lot of gray areas. We know there are court cases going on at the moment around cannabis clubs and so on. So there's a lot of unresolved legal issues. Yet we want to grow this industry. The potential is there. Information is essential.
Well, from that perspective, it's a bit of a gray area, even for myself, having spent a lot of time with the very famous Facebook and their controversial data vibes, and as well as the other social media platforms. While data is also a very powerful tool, in the right or wrong hands, it can be used for all kinds of reasons. I'm yet to have an official opinion on that, but I definitely believe that you have the right to protecting all of your data, to sharing what it is that you need to, that you want to share, and no one should really be using that information to exploit it. While at the same time, I use the information on demographics and locations and how much money a household will have, X, Y, and Z, so we can understand how to speak to people. So I'm always kind of just on both sides of the scale. So I wish I had a more solid answer to that. But data at the end of the day is important. It's definitely not going anywhere. We just need to figure out as a unit, as a community, even the data that comes from a set, a co-shared space of all the growers and stakeholders. What does that database look like? What are we doing with that information? And I hope to be on the right side of history where we're using that stuff for good. But what really does that mean at the end of the day? I like to think that I'm responsible, and I think everyone else should really be responsible. If you're posting your canna pics and X, Y, and Z, then you should expect that you're on the radar of whatever that ecosystem looks like.
Okay, thanks. I think Travis wanted to come in. I saw Pierre also raising a finger, I think, and Mirishan was concerned about this. So maybe Travis?
Yeah, first of all, just caveat, fully compliant in terms of data, privacy, and all of that. But when we're talking about data in South Africa, accessibility is a huge issue, right? Because when I'm talking about data, I'm talking about smartphones and access to the internet. But when you look at that data in South Africa, you're only seeing a small portion of the population, and you're not seeing the majority in the country. 90% of consumers in South Africa are not white, are black or colored, and they don't have the same access. And in the future, they're going to be the people that we should be marketing to. And currently, they're the people we understand the least. So that's where you need to stop and think, how do I collect data within this context, right? And that, I think, is where the one-to-one comes into play. I think that's where a lot of surveying comes into play, and going into communities and talking to people, having activations about your brand and educating them. And the problem in South Africa is that cannabis has been so racially stigmatized since the moment that colonists showed up that people are afraid to even admit that they consume cannabis because they'll be labeled as a druggie or whatever it may be. And that's what my research showed. I'm by no means an expert on a country that's not my own, and I don't live there anymore, so I won't dig a hole for myself, but it's very important to make sure that you're speaking to the majority and not a small minority that doesn't represent the future growth of the industry.
I'm the worst example. Mirishin, would you like to come on the point? You look like you wanted to say something on that. Yeah, but he's dropped at the moment, I think. You know.
I think the safest way in South Africa, because I completely believe that in America you've got data systems set up by the most incredible human beings on the planet, and nobody can ever get in there. But here in South Africa, it costs you 500 rand to get in there, roundabout. So we've just in the just the people who work for me, we've been arrested at least once a year since we started this, and from there it comes the backlash and all those type of things. So you get to a point where you would rather want nobody to know what you are doing, because you are exposing your clientele, you're exposing your patients, you're exposing that, and so forth and so forth. I think the safest way in South Africa is to start doing it, is to start documenting it on a medical side, because let's be honest, guys, if you're selling someone a cannabis drop to help them sleep, and if they're having a vape or a joint to help them sleep, it's still medicine. The one is seen as recreational, yes, and the one is seen as medicinal, yes, but to me, it's completely the same. I believe that a lot of people who have been using cannabis before the cannabis industry came about is now not having to use cannabis because they actually kept themselves away from that. So, Mark, it's difficult here. Yeah, it's
Well,
all right.
From my limited experience.
I was just going to bring a question. Mike from Ghana was asking, who should be responsible for protecting consumers from unethical cannabis brands advertising? So there's another risk there of unethical advertising. These databases can also be used. So who should be responsible for protecting the consumer?
But so far, there are many different people. Sorry, you go first, Norms. Throw it, girl.
Thanks. Yeah. So just in the context of that, myself, an example is that I quit drinking about almost 2 years ago. And I will continue to log onto Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever it is, and I'll see an alcohol advertisement. I'll see an X, Y, and Z. The social media platforms themselves accept money from anyone, anywhere, as long as, give me money, you can do what you like. Or you can advertise and you can target these people. So when it comes to the answer to that question, it's a little bit difficult for me to say. But I do think that just taking it back to what was mentioned just now with departments and all of that, having the relationships that I have with the people who have been working towards the legalization of the plant and the things that come with it, they're also still, they're open and welcome to kind of hearing ideas and seeing sample business structures as case studies and to collect that data to see how it works out. I think in South Africa, the entire conversation is definitely still in its infancy. And I think we also have a responsibility to tell the authority spaces how it is and what should work and where we should draw lines and X, Y, and Z, because, the decriminalization is a huge step, as a starting step. But what does the rest of it look like? And I think it should be an ongoing conversation and not just kind of, oh, it's legal, let's do our thing, or like, let's go out there and let's just target and advertise. Going back to,
Okay, so I think I think we all agree there's a need to be responsible about this. We're hoping for a growing and much more open industry going forward. But I think we all agree in the industry and the sector that there has to be responsibility. We had two questions related to this. One, Sibu was asking about whether cannabis will be restricted like alcohol is and how do we protect children. And also Andile was asking, would the industry be restricted in the way that tobacco is with regards to marketing? So we know there are these kind of examples of limitations in terms of alcohol, tobacco marketing. Do we see these things? Do we think they're appropriate for cannabis? How do we protect children? Travis, you were wanting to speak.
Yeah, they're monitored or made compliant pretty much the same way in the States. Each of those industries, tobacco, alcohol, it's LDA compliance or legal drinking age compliance generally. So you can't market to children. Your logos and brands can't appeal to children. I think the question previously about like preventing unethical brands is kind of signifies very deeply like where South Africa is in terms of the stigma of cannabis, like the question in itself. Like, to me, cannabis is not an unethical product. It's a wellness product. It's not addictive. It doesn't cause the destruction of family like other things that we consume do very often, and society in itself. It does not cause cultural or societal problems. There is no research to back that up across the globe, in my opinion. So to be sitting here and discussing like how to prevent unethical promotion of a product that really helps families, communities, and people to be healthier is something that needs to really change, and that will come through more information and more conversation.
Okay. But at the same time, you're saying, I mean, there are these limits that we're used to with tobacco and alcohol, and they're routinely applied to cannabis. I don't know, what do the other panelists think about that?
I'd like to challenge a little bit of that. You know, some people, including myself, will take a break from THC, indefinite breaks, long-term, short-term, because it does get a bit much. I think in order to have a authentic conversation around cannabis and all of that is to be able to allow room from the pro side to say, yes, you know, some people do get overwhelmed by X, Y, and Z. You know, some people say, oh, but are you smoking a sativa or an indica or whatever it is? Those conversations are real and they do happen. Some people can get stuck in excessive misuse, if not abuse, of marijuana, and it does affect families. So, and I know this is very distasteful, you know, kind of, it could be triggering rather to put this out there so openly. But I think in order for us to have a qualified conversation is to acknowledge that there is too much of an anything is not good for you. Sugar has its good and bad. Whatever, lettuce, all of it. If you eat too much of this, even carrots, man, like whatever it is, you know, they have good and bad effects. So in order for us to also have this really cool conversation is to have that agreed upon FAQ sheet and have those infrastructures in place that do have support facilities for someone who's, you know, gotten a little bit stuck on THC, just like how someone gets a little bit stuck on alcohol or gets stuck on whatever it is, gambling, whatever, you know, and having the infrastructures that are available to make it a safe enough space so people are kind of feeling a certain type of way, or you're getting a bit to this and you're getting a bit to that, or like just overthinking it or whatever it is, that those infrastructures are also there. So that's just kind of what I wanted to throw in there. But I definitely agree on everything you're saying.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, on a one-off basis, yes, it can have negative impacts, but, and I apologize for that comment, but research as a whole in terms of society and in terms of addiction is not proven to have a negative effect, is all I'm saying. In terms of unethical, like over-promoting its use and saying that you need it every day, or that you need this for this, or that it solves this problem, we do not have enough medical research for cannabis brands to be making those kinds of medical claims. I 100% agree with that. And a lot more research needs to be done to get to that point.
I think this comes back also to the education question and the disinformation question that Pierre raised earlier. I mean, and Mbali also raised education very strongly. You know, we need that education engagement, and you know, I think it was Mbali spoke about using education in marketing as well. So maybe we can come back to that. What sort of education do we need for a responsible industry that's also not a stigmatizing kind of industry and a stigmatizing debate or discriminatory debate? Pierre, welcome back. I saw you sort of left us.
Sorry about that.
It wasn't my facilitation, it was the internet rather. Welcome back. And Mirashin also. I think there are some storms around Gauteng, and maybe that's affecting the internet at the moment. But we were just discussing, I think when you were off the line, you know, we had some questions related to regulation and responsibility in terms of advertising. Would it be similar to what we have with tobacco and alcohol, and how one would feel about that? And I'm quite interested in coming back related to that education question and how we combine education and marketing for effective marketing in a responsible way. Anything, Pierre, on that?
I couldn't agree more. Education is absolutely critical for this industry. But I'm going to go back to data versus emotions. If you want to create a brand, create an emotional connection with the person. And one of the very proven kind of types of marketing is cause-related marketing, so I think the cannabis industry is very, very well suited to create an emotional connection with their target markets. and use cause-related marketing. And it's not only about medicine or about consuming adult use. What about if you're buying a towel, buy a hemp towel, because it's good for the environment and it saves climate change. So I think everybody who's marketing around cannabis in the broader sense of it, try to find that emotional connection. The legislation, I think, will catch up. I find Facebook seems to be a little bit isolated in this. If you mention cannabis, you get banned. I haven't had that experience with South African media companies. And in fact, in the last 3 days, we're getting extensive coverage. Yes, we're selling a fund, but we're getting extensive coverage in the mainstream media. So I don't think, look, if you want to sell cannabis to smoke, technically that's illegal. So you're going to have marketing restrictions. But if you're going to sell a legal product, I think the restrictions are not that bad. The law has to change and make those other products legal. Let's be clear about that.
Pierre, just clarify, cause-related marketing you're talking about? You mean by cause-related?
So find a cause like save the world. Find a cause like climate change. Save the cause like why did the pharmaceutical people lie to us? Find a cause like opium abuse is killing millions. Find a cause like plant-based medicine. I mean, there are so many in the industry. It's incredible. And choose that cause, wrap your brand around that, make an emotional connection, and your brand will be successful.
Great, thanks for that. Challenge with Facebook, but Mbali's been using Facebook a lot. I wonder, Mbali, could you just clarify how you're finding Facebook and dealing with that? Because you've talked about using Facebook, Pierre, sort of raised the concerns with Facebook.
So on Facebook, as it is, people have created their own online communities. I actually really I dig the internet and I love online. People came out to complain that, we're losing people to the internet, but even on the internet, we found our online communities. So there are a variety of plant enthusiast groups, of kind of grower societies, of X, Y, and Z communities and platforms where people are coming to have these conversations, to ask questions about whether it's their plant or, business and X, Y, and Z. So I find that because people exist on those platforms and there are communities there where people are having those conversations, also, instead of always feeling the need to speak, we always feel the need to educate people and, hey, learn about this. Sometimes a little bit of listening goes a lot further than that, understanding what people's deep concerns are and just sitting in the room and just absorbing what's going on. So, yeah, Facebook is cool. The communities are growing. None of them have been banned yet. And that's where people come to have meaningful conversations around what we're talking about.
So clarify, I mean, how do you avoid getting banned then? Other people are getting banned. Just give us technically, if we want to use that, how are we going to do it to not get banned?
I suppose it depends on how you're posting, on what you're posting. Also remember that, other people are on Facebook. So if they find your post to be offensive, they might report it. So, some people also then, to manage that, they will set privacy settings so that it's only specific people in their network who can see it, that they know and trust to respect their, or just to be okay with whatever it is that they're posting. So there's a little bit of work that we need to do on our side. I know, also having come from a brand space where brands are looking to endorse certain types of content creators and influencers and whatever's ambassadors, and they'll normally scroll someone's timeline to see okay, no, that person, too many THC posts, we can't align ourselves with that brand. So there's an ongoing, it looks like Pierre wants to say something, but there's this ongoing kind of thing. Just manage what it is that you're saying. I think just putting consciousness into what you're putting out there and making sure that it actually aligns with what you're saying and it doesn't misrepresent the rest of the society. I think that's a really important thing. Then we can meet each other halfway.
You're using Facebook groups, right? Closed groups.
Yes.
So they are closed groups. I think that's important distinction.
Yes.
Mark, can I chip in here? We had an example this week. We are advertising an investment fund, okay? It's a listed entity. The prospectus is this thick. And we use the word cannabis. And when you want to boost a post, you use Facebook advertising and we were banned. Okay. There's nothing illegal about investment in Canada. But they just canned us. They just said, sorry. And we're going, but hang on, everything we're doing is legal. And Facebook just said, sorry for you, and they took us off the platform.
Yeah.
So what they actually do is they take your advertising account and they say you can't use it. Okay. So if you're doing content-based marketing, that's a different story because they can't say what's inside the video. And if somebody mentions cannabis, they ban you. But if you say boost a post, so you buy advertising and they link it to a cannabis topic, they just cannabis.
So clear distinctions, just for anyone who's trying to do this. It seems like the closed groups is pretty important, and you can't boost. And that's my understanding. You can't pay for advertising in this at the moment, on Facebook at least. Travis, what's the situation in the US? Is it the same?
Well, Facebook is run out of the US, so it'll be the same everywhere, I would assume.
Yeah, correct.
We have lots of brands that get away with advertising on Facebook, but they're not connecting their advertising to a website that then is in any way associated with a plant touching business. You can put your logo on a t-shirt and sell it on Facebook for your cannabis brand, but that t-shirt or that ad should not click through then to your dispensary's website. So as long as you're not creating a trail from your advertisement campaign back to something that is plant touching, then you can get around it. But that's like, generally that would be the way. Like we push a lot of our audiences to social media so that you can target the people that we say are your cannabis consumers through social media. But in that case, you cannot be advertising yourself as a plant touching business. You could sell a t-shirt with your logo on it though.
Okay, great. If there are questions from the wider audience, please do share them in the chat line. We have some people monitoring the chat line and they will try and push through the questions from you as the wider audience. And the panelists do feel free to challenge each other or question each other. I'm still interested in how we do more education, how we take on the challenge that Pierre raised of the disinformation that is out there, especially with these constraints that we're facing. What's the best way? We've got good suggestions for education and challenging disinformation to help the marketing.
Yeah, I think tell the story. Storytelling is going to be critical. We've got a great story to tell. We should all tell our stories. So I think this is another kind of product, if you want to call it very broad, but content-based marketing is the way to go. And in my mind, I'm an avid video fan. Always have been. Audio visual is better than audio or visual, so you've got to go. So we're living in the video era, which is wonderful. The cost of production have come down, the ease of editing, so tell the story.
I agree with Pierre. You definitely need to tell a story in order to change the conversation and to create an emotional connection to positive feelings surrounding the plant. The one thing that Pierre did say about focusing on cause as a way to make an emotional connection, we tend to focus on effect, actually, as a way of making a connection. So we look like I was launching a edibles campaign yesterday for one of the largest brands in California, and they sell sleep aid, pain relief, and so edibles associated to those desired effects, right? So what we do is we go out and we find people who are interested in cannabis, purchasing cannabis, but then also searching for sleep relief, visiting pain relief centers or chiropractors or things like that. And we would focus those campaigns towards them. And then the copy associated and the visuals associated with those campaigns is, are you having trouble sleeping? Click here for THC relief. And then even more so, like for the sleep campaigns, we'll probably run a lot of those late at night, contextually reaching out to those people in the moment that they need sleep relief, so that the next day when they're getting ready to go to sleep, they think, oh, I should order this product to help me tonight.
Okay, that's very practical marketing information. Other thoughts on that? We're getting quite a lot of people dropping on and off, including our panelists.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, you can tell a good story, but if you don't have a good product, you're going to fail, because it needs to be consistent and authentic. So, I see that as product-related marketing. I get a product that fulfills a need, and you better fulfill that need. That's true to your promise. So, absolutely agree with what's just being said.
Okay, I've got a question from Mike as well, who's saying there's a lot of talk about building South African brands internationally. You think it's more important to advertise locally first, before branching out internationally. So we have an international perspective on the panel. We have local perspectives. Let me start with the international panel. What's the potential there for South African brands internationally? Travis?
Definitely. When I first moved back to the States, I started helping brands expand from one state into another through licensing deals. So if you're a cannabis brand in California, you can't just launch in New York and ship your products across state lines, right? You need to set up a licensing agreement with a producer or a grower or cultivator or processor of cannabis in that new state. And then you need to make an agreement for that state or that producer to then put things into your package and to create into your packaging and to create the same product for you in that state if you're not going to go get licensed to operate in that state. And I've had those similar conversations with groups in South Africa, just not really at that point yet where it makes sense from a financial standpoint to bring brands over from the US. I do know that Mike Tyson's group is looking at Uganda, pretty closely, for example. And yeah, in that case, they would find a cultivator in that country and they would agree to send their packaging to that country and have the product produced in that country and then sold as part of the larger marketing strategy of that group.
So specifically for South African product going international, is there room? I mean, because I would start from the position that we want to do maximum value addition in South Africa, contribute to our economy as much as possible, and maybe then export, finished product out. I know there's raw product going out, but is there room for that at the moment? And could we?
Yeah, certainly. I think there's.
Pierre?
Yeah. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Pierre. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's massive potential. While I 100% agree, we need to beneficiate and we mustn't be turned into farmers. That would just be an incorrect strategy. But we also got a weak currency, which makes export of products great. So if the product's good, it's a great business opportunity to generate foreign exchange. However, when you talk about marketing it, you've got to come back to the same answer. Who's your target market? Is it Europe? Is it America? And as a personal opinion, I prefer to use local marketing people in the destination where your consumer is. So you produce the product here, but if you want to reach a German consumer, go and talk to the German experts who understand their market better than we do.
Okay.
You could use Trevor.
Local versus international markets, especially for South African product. We have such good brands in South Africa. We know we have great brands. We got to use them to the maximum benefit, I think.
Well, since a couple of years ago, when Snoop Dogg said that Durban Poison is one of the great strains, I feel like we definitely have qualified that we have something to give to the world. I definitely think that the export conversation is not something I'm completely skilled at, but there is an opportunity given the exchange rate within South Africa. I definitely want to, I would love to see more of the kind of hemp growers and the local markets going out. I know we don't want to just be limited as farmers, etc. But I think there's still a lot of opportunity for us to kind of get this ready here, make sure that people are all in the know. As mentioned earlier, people are getting arrested without even knowing that they don't need to get arrested. So putting that all together so that the entire community is on the same page and fully understanding of stuff, so we can support and endorse one another. I think I like the idea of kind of thinking global, acting local, and really nailing that. We have so much to offer as South Africa. Even the underground entrepreneurs who've been working in the shadows who are producing insane products and insane, tools, gadgets, whatever it is that kind of go within the industry. I think that's something that I'm excited to see grow and show up in a big way.
Right, thanks. Yeah, I think we've seen in so many sectors as well, and we think the same with the plant cannabis, that you need also your strong local industry to be a platform for effective international marketing as well. And in terms of the brand, we need the brand rooted and appreciated locally to make it also strong internationally as well. The brand.
Can I tell you one interesting story? I was dealing with some guys, let's just say internationally, who were interested in South African product, but they wanted it branded South African and they wanted it linked to a small African farmer. And they said, if you could do that, people, in this market I'm discussing would buy because it would support the small African farmer. So he has a combination of a South African brand, a little bit of cause-related marketing. I don't want to buy from the big guys. I'm not interested in the corporates. I want to support the little guys. The authenticity comes from Africa. It's linked to Durban poison and rooibos and all the other wonderful strains. So I think that's a really interesting brand creation opportunity based on something that is socially fantastic, which is support the small African farmer in Africa.
Yeah. Yeah, that's certainly a passion for me. The importance of those small African farmers around South Africa, and in fact the region, we should embrace Southern Africa as a region as well, and who are currently in some of the poorest parts of our region, earning a living through this product. We can't lose them as we go into this legalizing and broadening the marketing and so on. How do we bring those farmers along to be some of the primary beneficiaries? Be a concern for me. Mirishin, I'm so sorry you've been having internet problems. We're told there are internet problems around Gauteng. Welcome back. We were discussing local versus international marketing. As I speak to you, you look like you're frozen again. So Mirishin, you're welcome to come in if you are able to. Travis, I see your finger as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I really think Mbali brings up a really good point about the strains and how marketable they are abroad, very much. And then also the soil and the history behind farming in South Africa, and you've been tilling that land for centuries and centuries, and it's therefore why you have some of the best strains and most effective cannabis products in the world and to offer the world. As the market becomes more mature here in the States and in North America and in other countries, people start to buy based on effect, like I was discussing, and that effect becomes tied to the strain that you're purchasing. Like, this strain is good for that strain is good for that. And I think being able to market those strains has a really, really good future abroad as well as locally. And then, yeah, there's always the tying it to a famous name that has an emotional connection in that country. I mentioned Trevor Noah, but you could use him as a brand ambassador. So far, brand ambassadors are like sponsors, brand sponsors. Famous people those deals haven't worked out so well in the States thus far.
Okay. It strikes me as well that, as well as the storyline of the African farmer, there's the storyline of the long history of cultural use of cannabis in different ways in Southern Africa. There's the storyline of the gogo in the village using it in her healing, who learnt it from her mother, and so on. I think there's a lot of stories that can really build strong South African brands around that. I see Mbali's catching on to what I was saying now.
Zulu warriors using it for battle and things like that as well.
So
they're fantastic stories.
You're still with us. A chance, your last wrap up, 30 seconds to a minute, the last words from each of you. Pierre, you were coming forward, so you're over to you, Pierre.
Okay, I'll jump in. There's a very interesting book called The African Roots of Cannabis. And the truth of our distorted history is hemp came from Europe, but the psychoactive cannabis comes from Africa, and we should own that. So I'm just going to close that little debate we're having here and saying, let's own it. Let's own it as a continent. And just to wrap up, brand building doesn't have to cost millions. If you're creative, you're authentic, and you have a bond with your target markets, it can be done. It always seems so daunting that unless you've got huge amounts of money, you can't create a brand. And I think YFM is a living example where we had hardly any money, but there was a connection there and it worked. Anyway, thank you so much. It's been great being on the panel.
Thanks very much, Pierre. Thanks. Your final word?
Yeah, find an issue and solve that issue with your product. Speak to the issue that you're solving. Find the consumers that have that problem and figure out how your product is going to help them and convey that message to those people.
Great. Thanks. Mbali, closing words, I think.
Sure. What they both said, I think pretty much sums it up for me. Being the community person, I would say fine, see where your local communities are. What the industry together has a responsibility to do is to create those infrastructures where we can have those conversations and also educate the powers that be, being the people that govern us, so that they can understand what it is, and we qualify that information as well. That's what I have to say.
Great, thanks. Mirishin, you're back. A chance to give your closing words.
Oh, it's such a shame.
Okay, the closing wave from Mirishin. Sorry about the connection, and I think time's up. So thank you very much to all the panelists. Thank you to all the participants. Thanks for some of the questions that came through. Sorry if we couldn't answer all of them. Thanks. Yeah, and if you were in a spoken word event, we could click our fingers, and we'll get spoken word another time from Travis, I hope. I do want to thank again our sponsor for this panel, Evolved Magazine. That's at evolvedmagazine.co.za. Please, the next session, which is on the rise of the psychedelics industry, is 4 p.m. So please make a turn there. Chiba Academy is also showing people around their new Academy site tomorrow morning. You can still register, go and visit them if you want to. So thanks again to everyone. Thanks to Chiba for organizing this and for having me here. I've appreciated it a lot and learned a lot. Have a good afternoon.